Welcome to This Week in Morgan County. I'm your host, Russell Mokhiber. Our guest this week is Bill Lanz. Bill is a nutritional biochemist, and he's president of a local group, the Morgan County Forum on Arts, Science, and Technologies. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Russell.
Bill, you you graduated from the University of Michigan in 1951. You taught there for 25 years. Till 1980, then you went to the University of Illinois, taught there, then to the National Institutes of Health, and you retired in 2002. Since then, when people say Bill Lanz, or at least when I think Bill Lanz, I think omega-3, omega-6 balance.
Good. Keep doing that.
And what is omega-3 and omega-6, and why is the balance so important?
All right. What it is omega-3 and omega-6 are essential vitamin-like nutrients. You have to eat them in order to have them in your body, and you can't live without them. They're really essential vitamins. The important thing to know is they're very similar, and you metabolize them in very similar ways, and they compete against each other in your body for forming new products. And the exciting thing about these essential nutrients is that they form hormones which act on receptors on nearly every cell and every tissue of your body. So it's just all over your whole physiology, your whole health depends on functioning.
On these. And you say that omega-3 is the good omega and omega-6 is the bad omega.
Yeah, but they're both essential.
Both essential.
And so like water, you need water, but you don't need to put your head underwater and hold it there for a while.
Right, and you've explained to me and to others that, for example, the Japanese, if you look at the Japanese population, their balance is 50-50.
Close to that.
Close to that. In the United States, it's 4-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3.
That's a good description of the imbalance that we have in America because of the foods we eat. And the point of these essential nutrients is that if you eat them, you've got them in your body. If you don't eat them, you don't have them. And so your food choices determine the balance of 3 and 6 because that's what you ate.
And because the Japanese eat fish,
a lot of it.
A lot of fish. And because omega-3s are in fish,
yes,
they are more in balance. And because we primarily eat meat, we're primarily out of balance. Is that generally it, to simplify it?
No, and in fact, I think a lot of people blame meat for too many things that they shouldn't do that. The big imbalance in the United States food system is an excessive abundance of vegetable oils that is put into everything. It's just
the processed
added.
foods.
And the processed foods all have added soybean oil. If you look at the ingredients and you start to see soybean is way up on the list of ingredients, and soybean is way out of balance in terms of carrying grams, thousands of milligrams of omega-6 that you don't need. Now you start to see the burden of American foods on American health because those omega-6 nutrients now make omega-6 hormones, which are potent hormones in chronic inflammatory diseases. And the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has pointed out that our $2 trillion expenditure for treating chronic diseases is going for something that could have been prevented. And the expense that the financial losses that Americans have is preventable if they just had a different balance of omega-3 and omega-6.
You believe that this imbalance is leading to disease?
Yes.
And there's a way to test. There's a simple way to test whether you're in balance or not. And that's a blood test.
That's right.
It's called a HUFA test.
Well,
Wait, what is it called?
you could call it, the name doesn't matter.
What's the name of it?
Well, there'll be different names, but
Okay.
you want a blood test that gives you the balance of the highly unsaturated fatty acids, which are
What is
HUFA.
it? What is your balance?
My balance last time I measured
Yeah.
it was about 55% omega-3 and 45% omega-6.
And the average American is?
About 20% omega-3 and 80% omega-6, and that is associated with a high incidence of arthritis, asthma, heart attacks, chronic inflammatory disorders.
Okay. And if you took someone with an 80-20, the average American, and changed their diet, you could bring the omega-3s and omega-6 into balance.
That's right.
And how would you change the diet? What would you do?
Well, the simplest thing for a generality is to nix the 6 and eat the 3. So you stop eating so much of the foods that have very negative balance scores, like soybean oil and corn oil and sesame oil and hummus and tofu and all these, and potato chips. All these have negative scores like -25, -40. Walnuts, for instance, are marketed as a source of omega-3, and yet the marketers don't tell you that there's 5 to 6 times more omega-6 in there. And so walnuts have a negative score like -45 or -50. They are not helping at all compared to flax, which is a +40 and has a lot more omega-3 than omega-6.
If we wanted to follow a general rule, Michael Pollan, who's a nutrition guy,
Yeah.
says eat, not too much, mostly plants.
Eat real food,
Eat real food, not too much,
not too much.
mostly plants. Will
Right.
that bring you into balance?
No, because a lot of vegetarians eating mostly plants are also eating a lot of vegetable oils on their salad dressings and stuff like that. And they're eating tofu and other, for instance, meatless frankfurters sound like a cool thing. And I used to eat those in meatless hamburgers. They're soybean products until I learned, what the balance in a meatless product was. You can buy meatless shrimp, which is a real weird paradox because it has shrimp flavor, and it's made out of soybean, and instead of the shrimp score of a +15, with the soybean now, it's like a -25, and it's just antithetical to eating seafood, to eat these meatless things, because they're all negative because of all that soybean in there. And the interesting thing is, you talk about all-American diet, soybean was not eaten in large quantities by Americans until after the Second World War. And the introduction of soybean oil and corn oil into the diet, it's a fairly recent thing, the last 50 years. In all of my career, I've been watching the American diet just get saturated with omega-6 in the diet. When I was a kid, the standard cooking oil was butter and lard. And both of them have butter is like -2 and lard is about -10, like olive oil. And those were our standard cooking oils. And, and everything's changed, and not for the best.
You're not a vegetarian. You eat fish and meat.
I eat everything.
You eat everything.
Yeah.
But you keep in mind the foods this is the top of your list, the omega-3, omega-6 balance. This
Yeah.
is the thing you keep an eye on the most and that you're most passionate about.
Yes.
But as you just, for example, are saying something that's going to drive mainstream nutritionists nuts, which is, hey, eat some steak and, if you want to fry it in lard, go ahead.
Yes.
So it's a bit counterintuitive. And you believe in this so much that you have an award out of $3,000 in an essay contest.
Yes.
And these videos are on your website, on the FAST website.
No,
No.
the URLs are there, and we will give the URL at
And
the end of the
promote it,
interview.
and
We'll provide that.
And we'll promote the URL. So these are 2 videos, and you're telling people, write an essay about these 2 videos,
Right.
which deal with omega-3 and omega-6.
And how they might blend into the daily lives of Morgan County residents. Because you are talking about lifestyle when you say vegetarian. When you talk Michael Pollan, it's a style of approach to food. And remember, the second thing was not too much. So if I was to start with Michael Pollan's advice, eat real food, the real I put in there. He just says eat food, not all this prepared synthetic stuff, but the real vegetables and fruits and meats and so on. But not too much. There is a calorie problem in the United States. People are eating more calories than they're burning, and they're having trouble controlling their appetite to keep them. Anyone that's tried to lose 10 pounds understands that it's a difficult thing. But when you got the calories under control, you really want to also then get the omega-3, omega-6 balance under control, because those hormones are driving your body's physiology and moving it towards pathophysiology instead of healthy physiology.
Okay, now this essay contest.
Yeah, okay.
You're telling people, write an essay about 800 to 1,000 words.
Right.
Send it in, and there's going to be a panel of judges, or
Yeah.
there'll be a panel of judges to
Right.
determine what's the best essay on omega-3, omega-6, and on these 2 videos,
On
and how they apply to Morgan County.
That's the key thing, is to have Morgan County people say whether they envision it fitting into their life or not.
Is the essay contest limited to people in Morgan County?
Well, it's pointed towards them, but
Okay.
people over across the river in Hancock are our neighbors, and
All right.
we let them participate also.
But the best essay gets a $3,000 check.
That's
from
right.
FAST. Okay,
That's
so
right.
we'll publicize that. Now, there have been books written about omega-3, omega-6,
Yeah.
and this, and it's very popular, and it's driving people to go out and buy fish oil supplements.
Right.
And there's this little bit of a debate over take supplements, eat the fish. What do you do? What do you do? Do you take the supplements? Do you eat the fish?
Well, and the answer is yes, I eat fish, I eat supplements of omega-3, but I also avoid eating foods that are high in omega-6. And so the message, in order to achieve a balance, if you're eating 17,000 milligrams of omega-6 a day, do you want to eat 17,000 milligrams of omega-3? You don't need more than a couple thousand milligrams of omega-6 as an essential nutrient per day. And so if you nix the 6, you'll get a lot more efficacy of the 3 that you take. So this is an important thing to realize, that to get the most out of those omega-3 supplements, get the 6 out of the competition. It's just overloading the system. And we're talking about like chips and Yeah.
the bad 6, what I call the bad 6 are in chips, and what else?
Tofu. And walnuts. And
but in terms of the
nuts.
mainstream diet, all nuts,
Yeah.
tofu, which is not the mainstream diet, but chips, what about the mainstream American diet? Where is it?
It's in the oils that are added to the real foods that Michael Pollan tells you to eat. And the point of the essay is to look at these 2 videos and observe what we know about omega-3 and omega-6, and then interpret that would that ever fit in the daily life of Morgan County? I'm curious to know, and that's why we're sponsoring the essay. We want to hear Morgan County people say whether they can even see a future for balancing their nutrients. And first they have to know that these are nutrients, and that balance has a big impact on your physiology. But then the thing is when Gary McDaniel started the Sardine Club years ago, there were a couple of kids that were curious about eating sardines. that has now grown over the last few years to where there's like 100, 110 kids that get together in the cafeteria and eat sardines.
In the Berkeley Springs High School cafeteria?
In the Warm Springs Intermediate School cafeteria. Okay. And I've even heard some poignant stories of kids graduating from intermediate to middle school and missing out on, regretting that now they can't go to Sardine Club anymore because they graduated out of intermediate school.
Although they can go to any local supermarket and buy a can of sardines for $1 or $1.50.
Right.
And that is a good way of getting omega-3 oils.
And that is what Morgan County residents would do if they understood the merits of balancing the 3 and the 6.
What a lot of people are doing, though, instead, is they're going to Costco and Walmart and buying the fish oil capsules.
Right.
And it's a multi-million-dollar market. And I want to raise this issue. There's been pushback against this theory in the public press.
Yes.
And for example, a recent New York Times headline, fish oil claims not supported by the research. That was from March of last year, almost a year ago.
Right.
And that was based on a Journal of the American Medical Association study, which found that omega-3s don't affect the rates of heart disease and inflammatory diseases. And I'm wondering, and you say that's flawed research. Why is it flawed?
It's flawed interpretation of the evidence. In other words, you have evidence, and now the question is, how do you interpret it? And the interpretation is flawed. And we'll go back to your people going to Costco and buying a jar of supplements. And then they're going to, and I've had people say, Bill, I take a pill every day, 1 gram of fish oil every day, which has maybe 300 milligrams of omega-3 per day. Okay, now they're taking 300 milligrams of omega-3 per day, but they're eating a typical American diet with 17,000 milligrams of omega-6, and they are way out of balance. And that one little pill can't get them back into balance. And so after 10 years of doing that, they'll say, well, I've still got these chronic diseases that this didn't protect. The answer is, a spit in the ocean isn't going to change the ocean. And if you want to change, you've got to look at the balance. And those studies, and there are many studies where they gave 2 or 3 fish oil capsules, but if you look at the blood test, and a lot of times they don't report so they don't know what happened. All they know is nothing useful happened, and then they say, well, there's no. And the reason there's no good evidence is because they didn't gather it in the correct manner, and they didn't tell you that almost all of those studies that they averaged out were flawed studies.
Well, what you're saying about the flawed interpretation is that they didn't look at the omega-3, omega-6 imbalance. They just looked at omega-3.
Right.
And in other words, had they looked at, they studied a population where they knew what the balance was.
Yes.
And then
changed the balance.
Right. They would have found a decrease in disease.
Yes.
Okay, so you believe that. Have there been any such studies like that?
Very few, because...
And what do they show?
Well, there is one well-designed study which nixed the 6 and added the 3, and it showed fantastic results in 3 months. And it's published, it came out in electronic form on my birthday a couple years ago in the summertime. And it was the greatest birthday present you could have. And I helped those guys set up the design 5 years ago so that they could then do this study over the subsequent years, and it worked like a charm. And it's the only randomized gold standard clinical trial where they nixed the 6 and ate the 3 that gave very positive results in 3 months. And if they'd gone for 6 to 12 months, they would have gotten even more positive results.
Has anybody looked at a population and actually tested blood where the people are in balance, for example, like the Japanese
Oh, yeah.
population. And what do you find when you study
Right.
the Japanese population, which is generally in balance while we're out of balance?
That's right.
Have they looked at that, and what can you say about levels of disease in the Japanese compared to here?
Right. Take cardiovascular disease and heart attacks, a major killer in the United States. The rate in Japan 20 years ago compared to the United States 20 years ago was 1/5 the rate of that in the United States. We were dying of heart attacks 5 times more. And when you go back 50 years ago, the traditional Japanese balance was 65% omega-3 and 35% omega-6. They were really, before they got all the soybean,
When the Western diet
they got
went
westernized, and they are now drifting toward, the teenagers in Japan are as bad off as typical Americans. They're up to 80% omega-6, 20% omega-3. But their grandparents, still eating traditional food, are way back at 65-35. But in any case, the heart attack rate among the elderly Japanese is still much less than the United States. And this is important because it's not just heart attacks. There's prostate cancer, breast cancer, there's arthritis, asthma. There's a bunch of these things that are driven by omega-6 that are much worse in the United States than in Japan.
By the way, how did you, as a young nutritional biochemist, get onto this issue? I mean, this is now
Yeah.
pretty much your life's work. How did you
it
get
is.
onto it?
Yeah, well, and my kids understand, so I apologize to my kids for being kind of wonky and weird and contradicting our newspaper articles and so on. They say, that's okay, Dad, we understand, because my whole life has been following the trail of these fatty acids. So in 1965, when they discovered that these essential fatty acids were forming these potent hormones and that was affecting our lives, I was already a bit of an expert on fatty acid metabolism, and there was a thing called the Lanz pathway for metabolizing fatty acids and putting them into tissue membranes. And so I bet Bengt Samuelson back in '65 that if we looked, we would find that these hormones were coming from the membrane phospholipids that were being stored by the Lanz pathway, and that's where the hormone action would begin, out of the membranes. And so I actually took my family to Sweden, and we looked at that as a quick project, and sure enough, that pathway is the way that the essential things then form the hormones. And of course, the hormones then are being influenced by drugs, medications. And so in 1971, John Vane said, hey, aspirin is working because it's blocking the hormone formation of the omega-6 hormone. And we looked at that and we studied, then we spent another decade or so studying how drugs, I was a consultant for a lot of drug companies in the 70s, about how do you block the excessive omega-6 things. And that's the coxibs, the celecoxib and the aspirin-like drugs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. This whole area of billions of dollars of drugs are marketed to cut down the omega-6.
But in fact, there's an easier way.
Yeah.
Just
lower
lower
get it
your
out
intake,
of your diet,
get it out of your system.
Mix the 6, eat the 3, and you can do that. So
the
people,
drug companies can't like what you're saying.
no, they don't like it. And
You can't be consulting with them anymore.
Well, I showed them how to monitor it and set up the labs, but they weren't interested in nutrition. They were interested in patented drugs.
All right, we're going to have you back because we're running out of time now.
All right.
But the word is out, $3,000 to the best essay on omega-3, omega-6, deadline at the end of February.
and how it fits
And how
into
it-
the daily
the
life
lives
of Morgan
of
County.
Morgan County.
Because if it doesn't fit, it isn't going to work.
And we'll have information on our website on the videos and how to get them.
There's
Thank
a-
you. Thank you, Bill Lands, for joining us. We're going to have you back.
That's
Thank you very
time.
much.
All
And
right.
thank you for watching This Week in Morgan County.